Welcome back to another Explainer, everyone. Today we're diving into something that is just absolutely fascinating and honestly a little bit unsettling. We are taking a deep psychological dive into a truly dark, dramatic cautionary fable. It's this incredible story that maps out the intricate architecture of the human mind, but it does so using this incredibly vivid, grim, dark imagery. We're going to trace a wild journey from a place of established order straight down into pure, active nihilism. It's a gripping narrative for sure about how our deepest, darkest resentments can completely hollow out our highest virtues. So let's jump right in and explore the world of the Red Judge.
Right off the bat, our source material plunges us straight into a setting known as the Gilded Hollow. And get a load of this opening line. Welcome to a theater of shadows and golden facades. I mean, wow, right? It instantly sets this atmospheric, almost oppressive stage. We aren't just in some physical room here. We are literally walking inside a psychological landscape. The Gilded Hollow is the kind of place where things look super shiny and valuable on the outside, but underneath, well, down in the damp depths, something entirely different is brewing.
Okay, let's dive into this with Act 1, the Gilded Hollow.
So first up, sitting high upon a throne of established order, we meet the High Judge. Now, psychologically speaking, he represents the superego. This guy is the ultimate facade of justice and societal order. He's clutching a gavel, but our sources are super careful to point out that this gavel, it merely symbolizes society's illusion of value. He's the rigid rule maker, that part of the mind that constantly dictates what is right, what is proper, and exactly what must be obeyed.
But underneath the floorboards, crouching way down in the damp dark, is his exact opposite, Von Nix, the tarantula. And this creature represents the id. The tarantula is completely driven by this dark hunger for revenge. So while the judge sits way up high, Von Nix is down below, spinning this delicate web of gray silk, constantly whispering that any attempt to strive for greatness, to climb towards the heights, is actually a crime. The tarantula just wants everyone pulled down into what the text brilliantly calls the safety of the dust.
And mediating between these two extremes is our catalyst, the jester. The jester acts as the deceptive ego. Now, normally the ego tries to balance out the id and the superego, right? But not here. No way. The jester is the real villain of our tale. He doesn't balance these forces at all. He deliberately exposes their shared decay. He performs this twisted, mocking dance, holding up the symbols of the judge's authority like they're just hollow little toys, all while quietly feeding the tarantula's growing resentment.
Which brings us to Act 2, the Mask of Virtue.
Here, the tarantula begins to really weave its web of equality. But listen, the goal here isn't actual fairness. The goal is to bind the great in chains, so that all lives might be flat and sterile as a tomb. That's intense, isn't it? The tarantula is literally the active embodiment of resentment. By preaching this dark, twisted version of equality, it uses virtue as a shield. It hides its own venomous envy right behind the language of morality, basically ensuring no soul can ever surpass its own limitations.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact method the jester uses to completely destroy that illusion of value. It unfolds like a literal play happening inside the mind. Step 1, he feeds that underlying resentment, openly mocking the very idea of self-overcoming. Step 2, he parades around the symbols of authority, showing everyone they're entirely empty. And finally, he exposes the High Judge's lofty legalistic principles, revealing them to be nothing more than flimsy masks for the exact same venom of envy that drives the tarantula. It's a total psychological takedown.
So the jester tells this devastating lie that strikes right at the core of the superego. He actually convinces the High Judge that his rigid laws were never about justice or greatness in the first place. Instead, they were just a sterile desire for safety. The jester argues that all these fancy rules were just mechanisms meant to protect the weak from the dangerous, vibrant pursuit of growth. And sadly, it works. He convinces the judge to just completely abandon the mountain path of greatness.
Now things escalate in Act 3, the Void Mirror.
This is the climax. The jester forces the High Judge to look directly into the void mirror. Now, this isn't some physical piece of glass on a wall. It is an uncanny reflection that violently strips away every single one of the judge's moral justifications. It forces the superego to sit there and witness its own raw, unfiltered core. That noble, shiny facade we saw earlier, it is completely ripped away.
And here is the truly terrifying twist. When the judge looks into that mirror, he doesn't see a noble protector of justice staring back at him. Nope.
Instead, he sees the tarantula's raw nihilism looking back from his very own eyes. He sees a purposeless, burning desire to punish. Think about that. The law was never really about order. It was always just this deeply hidden desire to inflict pain.
Now, what's really interesting about this transformation is that this psychological fusion creates an absolute inferno of nihilism. That gavel, that fragile illusion of value, completely dissolves. All the symbols of power just melt away. In this horrifying, mind-bending moment of realization, the superego and the id actually merge. The rigid enforcer of rules and the resentful creature from the dark become one and the same. A new, monstrous, skeletal figure is born, defined no longer by a desire to uphold the law, but by a thirst for punishment that exists purely for its own sake.
And that takes us to Act 4, the architecture of retribution.
Let's starkly contrast this metamorphosis for a second. We started with the High Judge, right? A figure of established order, wielding a gavel, leaning heavily on the illusion of value to represent the superego. But look at what he has become, the Red Judge, an absolute creature of active nihilism. He doesn't wield a gavel to bring order anymore. He wields a branding iron. His punishment is entirely purposeless. He's the terrifying, merged reality of both the superego and the id. This entire system of order has decayed into a monstrous machine that only creates permanent, silent scars of retribution. And through all this, the jester stands totally triumphant, delivering his final mockery. He has successfully revealed the true architecture of the law. It was never a path to greatness. As the text so chillingly states, it was always a monument to destruction. It was merely a purposeless machine of revenge, essentially a mask for decay that used the concept of morality to disguise a burning desire to punish. And so the tarantula's dream is completely 100% realized. The mountain path, that dangerous, vibrant pursuit of growth we talked about, is totally abandoned. In its place, the human spirit of becoming is just left to rot in the suffocating safety of the dust. The whole world is trapped in this web of equality, a bleak place where greatness is forbidden and where absolute nothingness reigns supreme.
Safety versus self-overcoming. Okay, so we've spent this explainer deep inside a dark fantasy setting, but we need to pivot directly to our own reality right now to unpack the existential conflict hidden within this story. Because, this fable isn't just about some fictional judge. It's a profound anatomy of human motivation. So the crucial point is this ideological clash. On one side, we have the safety of the dust. This is that sterile desire for safety, driven by an inherent fear of greatness, where resentment is actually weaponized to pull everyone down to the exact same flat level. But on the other side, we have the pursuit of growth. This is the mountain path. It's dangerous, it's vibrant, and it absolutely requires striving for the heights and going through the incredibly difficult process of self-overcoming. I really challenge you to spot where this exact clash happens in your own life or even in the society around us.
Because ultimately, this is the core moral challenge of the story. This fable demands that we learn to look past hollow rhetoric. We must recognize when people, or honestly, even parts of our own minds, are using the lofty language of morality as a literal tool for destruction, simply because they fear what they cannot conquer. We constantly have to choose whether we're going to succumb to that creeping resentment, or if we're going to bravely embrace the raw, difficult process of self-overcoming.
Which leaves us with this really haunting question to close out our explainer today. When you strip away the golden facades and look deeply into the void mirror of our own institutions, are our systems of order truly built on justice, or are they merely a purposeless desire for retribution? I want you to think carefully about the architecture of your own rules. Until next time, keep questioning and keep striving for the heights.